Well, hey, welcome. Good morning. Glad you're at New Break, Ocean Beach today. Welcome to OB. I'm Carter Moss, pastor here. And welcome back. If you're here all the time, if you're brand new, I'd love to just meet you, say hi after, or eat tacos with you later, either way. But glad you're here. I don't know if you remember when I was younger, I used to love optical illusions. They're still kind of cool. Do you remember optical illusions? Like people would show you something that looks like one thing, but then if you can get your eyes to kind of switch, it looks like something else, looks like two vases next to each other, but all of a sudden it's kind of like two faces or sort of like images that are kind of hidden in other images. I always thought those were kind of fun, and I didn't realize there's actually some companies who do that in some of their logos, that they actually have like hidden kind of messages, kind of optical tricks in some of their logos. Now, I don't really know why you want a hidden message when you're trying to market something, so not to question marketing people, doesn't totally make sense to me. But anyway, it's pretty fun, pretty cool when you suddenly discover kind of what's in there, and I promise you, if you haven't seen some of these before, once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. So, all right, so are you ready? You may have seen, you may know some of these already because you're like smarter than me usually, but if you haven't, then it will be mind-blowing, and if you didn't, then this will bomb, and that's okay too. But Amazon, you probably already knew the arrow is a smile, right? It's supposed to be like sort of a smile shaped like that. But did you ever notice what's the two letters it's pointing to? It points from A to Z. Because Amazon sells everything from A to Z. That's literally their company's mission statement is we want to sell everything in the world. And I think they're pretty close. So that's a scary thought. But so that's part of why they built that in there. So, sometimes kind of little subtle stuff like that. The FedEx one, I'm like, I don't get what could possibly be in that. There's no pictures, just letters. But if you look between the E and the X, it's actually an arrow pointing this way. Because that's what FedEx does. They move you forward, they deliver your stuff, and they move it. You're not that impressed. That's okay, because it gets a little better. How about Goodwill? All right? I'd never noticed. Now it seems more obvious to me, but their little smiley face is actually the G in Goodwill, zoomed in. See? You knew that already? Yeah, that's all right. I thought it was cool. How about this one? It is National Ice Cream Day, by the way, so go get some today. If I can put in a plug, actually don't go to Baskin-Robbins. You should go to Lighthouse Ice Cream because it's right in OB, and we love to shop local. Plus, my kids work there. Plus, the owner goes to church here. But other than that, though, hey, none of them are paying me to say that. I'm just saying it's a good place. But if you were to go to Baskin-Robbins, you remember how many flavors they have? This was their popular. They have 31. Do you see the 31 in there? Oh, see? It's the pink. 31. And I've never seen that my whole life. I learned that as of this week. But there's that one. All right. Here's one more, though. This one, I swear, I've stared at it my whole life. I do love chips. I've looked at it. Never noticed this in my life till this week. The three little letters in the middle, the two T's and the I, is two people dipping a chip in salsa. Wow. Mind blown. Listen, don't say you never learn anything useful at church. You know what I'm saying? I learn useful stuff at church all the time. And sometimes he talks about the Bible, right? So you can just be like that. That's pretty much all I had for you today, but I hope you have a good Sunday, and we'll see you back next week, and we'll try to get to the Bible. No, but part of what I love, I'm like, man, I'm never going to unsee that now. Because when you see that stuff, now it just seems so obvious to you, right? But sometimes you just needed someone to open your eyes to see that it was there all along. You're welcome. That was my job today. What if that's what it's like with God? What if he's always at work and always present in our lives, but we just don't see it? Right? So then we say things like, God just doesn't work in my life, or God doesn't do the things he used to do, or he only does those big things for other people. If you've ever said any of that, and you never realized, what if he's at work in your life all along, and you just needed somebody to open your eyes to it? And what if once your eyes are open to God being at work in your life, you can't unsee it? Now you start kind of noticing it everywhere. Now something that just seemed like a coincidence, like a chance conversation, oh, that was a God moment. Now something that just seemed like another sunset and a great photo for Instagram is like, oh, maybe God's behind that. Right? What if the more we can have our eyes open to God, then you start to kind of see him everywhere? I believe that's actually one of the goals of our faith. And I think no matter where you're at in your spiritual journey, we always get people in here who maybe you've been walking with God for a long time. I think you still have a ways to go to have your eyes open to what God does. I know I do. Maybe you're brand new to the whole thing and you don't even know what that even means, God being at work. And so you have yet to even experience it. And so we want our eyes open. Often we get people in here who aren't even sure they buy into the whole thing, but we're always just glad you're here. God, you're to at least explore your faith and hope you get to hear and get a glimpse of what God's about, what worship's about, what community is like. And maybe that opens our eyes. I don't know if you have people in your life. I mean, we pray that the eyes of the world can be open to God, but I don't want to talk about the world today. I think about, what about people in your world, though? Your roommates, sometimes our own spouse, our own adult children. We say, God, I wish their eyes could be open. Our own roommates, our neighbors, our coworkers. All the recent studies say that, believe it or not, and it's hard to believe, 94% of people in San Diego don't go to church anywhere. So my guess is most people in your life are in that. What does it take to open people's eyes? Even whether they don't believe in it or they feel like they've been burned by it in the past or they're not even interested. How do we do that? Glad you asked. That's what we're going to talk about. And we got a great story. Another one of these little kind of hidden gems in the Old Testament. That's what we've been doing this summer. Hey, let's take some of these ancient stories that a lot of us either have never heard. I've never actually taught on them before either, so it's kind of fun. Maybe you've never heard them, or you just say, what in the world does that have to do with my life? And we dig into it. So I think it's fun. And we've been studying a guy this month. This will be our last week on him, but a guy named Elisha. And he's an Old Testament prophet sent by God, and he tries to help open people's eyes to who God is and what God is doing. And this story today, great, powerful, true story. There's a war going on, as there often was in the Old Testament, as there often is nowadays. I guess not a lot has changed in thousands of years. All sorts of military conflicts always going on, and there was back then. This is one of many wars with God's people, Israel. They're supposed to be God's chosen people, showing the rest of the world, opening people's eyes to what it looks like to follow God. Unfortunately, they don't do very well at that pretty often. But so we got Israel, and they're at war with Syria. And if you look on a modern-day map, those two countries it still share the border. And obviously, there's refugees now from Syria. So, same places. It's been around a long time. The place in in Syria today that we're reading about is called Aram. But you got the Arameans. They're at war with the Israelites. And we kind of read about both kings today. It doesn't say their names in here, but we know their names when you study history and kind of line it up. So the name of the king of Aram in Syria is Ben-Hadad II. And the king in Israel is Joram. And he's not a very godly king. Israel had a lot of bad kings. He's not the worst, but he's not very godly either. So both these countries are warring. In the middle of this war, God shows up. God starts intervening like he does and starts doing stuff to try to open people's eyes to the fact that he's always at work. So here's how it starts. It says, now the king of Aram was at war with Israel. After conferring with his officers, he would tell them, I'm going to set up my camp in such and such a place. So he's saying, here's where we're going to go next. I'll set up camp, and then we'll attack from there. The man of God, that's what Elisha's called in this story, the man of God sent word to the king of Israel saying, beware of passing that place because the Arameans are going down there. They're going to set up camp. So the king of Israel checked on the place indicated by Elisha. Time and again, Elisha warned the king, so he was on guard in such places. Elisha's like a spy. It seems like he seems to have this knowledge nobody else has. That's a pretty good guy to have on your staff, as king of Israel, because he always knows where the Arameans are going to be. You can imagine how that seemed to frustrate their king, as we'll read about in a second. But first, we got to get this. Listen, if we're really going to ever have our eyes open to God being at work, then we have to believe that he is always at work. Even when the world wants nothing to do with him. Even when the people in our lives may not want anything to do with him. Even when you don't want anything to do with him. It doesn't change the fact that he still wants in. He's always at work. In fact, that's the whole story of the Bible. Is God intervening, wanting into our world, into our lives. Sometimes people are raised with kind of this theory, it's called the watchmaker theory, that there is a God, a being that kind of created the whole earth, set it all up, and then winded it up like a watch, and now he just sits back and watches how the world's events are going to unfold. He's just watching, not intervening. But that is not who our God is. That is not the God we see in the Bible. This is actually the God who's intervening all the time, always wanting to work in people's lives. In fact, some of the stories we've read with Elijah, a story even finds a random widow, which is kind of the bottom of the totem pole back then, and a random country that has nothing to do with God. And God intervenes in her life and heals her son. Last week, it's the commander of an army, but not the army of God, different army. But God works in his life and does a miracle. God wants in. That's the whole story of the Bible. That's the whole story of of Jesus, really, which we won't go into today. But if you ever hear it called the incarnation, that's what Christmas is, the incarnation. And God actually puts skin on and becomes one of us, squeezes himself into human form because he so wants in our world. I think every generation grows up saying, our world right now, or our country right now, it's as far from God as it's ever been. It's so ungodly, people say, or it's going to hell in a handbasket. I don't even know what that one means, but it's just a weird phrase, right? And so we say all that. But listen, God hadn't changed at all. He's still just as at work as he ever was. We just got to have our eyes open to that, right? So we got to get to where we believe that so we can help open our eyes and other people's eyes to that. So part of what that means, I really believe God's at work, and I know there's some people that believe in him, follow him, some that don't, is that we don't need to be shocked when people aren't. It says so matter-of-factly here in the Bible, there's people warring against Israel, the people of God. But it just says it very matter-of-fact, almost like it's like a given. It's like not shocking. And I actually think that's an important message to us. That when we see people who don't believe in God, don't follow Jesus, living in ways that don't honor Jesus, you don't need to be shocked by that. We don't have to be shocked. Listen, you don't have to be offended by that. You don't have to be horrified by that. I got to be honest. We're never going to open the eyes of people to God if we're always just offended by them and so shocked at their behavior and so horrified. Why would they live according to someone that they don't really believe in and follow, right? I mean, they're just living according to just what makes sense. And that's not a criticism, it's just saying, right? And so, when you look through the life of Jesus, listen, you read through the Gospels, and I promise you will not find even one story where Jesus is pointing fingers and yelling at non-Christians for being non-Christian. He's never on their case for how they're behaving. In fact, the only people he does get pretty stern with and on their case about, guess who it is? The religious people who are being uncompassionate toward the non-religious ones. He says non-Christians are acting exactly how I expect them to act. Right? He wants to open their eyes to who he is, but he doesn't do it by being offended by them, shocked, horrified, angry at them, or hiding from them in his Christian bubble. And I'm guessing Jesus has a pretty nice Christian bubble that he could have gone into. But he isn't horrified, he isn't offended, and he doesn't hide from it. He actually works in a way that's opposite of how we work often. And just as a quick side note, just love teaching this little part when I get a chance. You think about how a lot of people, I don't want to generalize, sometimes church people, this is how we kind of approach, say like, non-Christians in our world, as we say, all right, well, first thing they need to do is clean up their act, clean up their behavior, quit your cussing, kind of stop some of the smoking and drinking, kind of change a lot of your behaviors. That's not godly. So fix your behaviors, then come believe in Jesus, and then you can come belong and hang out with us, right? And then come to our church. I mean, it makes sense, right? I want people to learn how to behave, and then they'll believe, and then they can belong. But I want you to know, Jesus actually flips that completely backwards, and he works the opposite way. Right? When you see in his life, you know what he did first with non-Christians, which you can't do if you're offended by them or hiding from them? He invited them to belong. Right? He belonged with them, hung out with them all the time, so much he actually got a bad reputation. Why do you keep hanging out with them? Because that's what I do. I want them to belong first. You know why? He knew if they belong with him long enough, their eyes will be opened and they'll believe. And many did. And then after you're a believer for a while and believing that you want God to work on you and on your life, guess what starts to change? Your behavior. So Jesus worked it this way through it. And so what if we do that? We're not shocked and offended. We just help people belong. Because we know what the people in our life really need, no matter how far they might seem from God, is they want a place to belong. They want some meaning and purpose, community. So, hey, come belong for a while, because we think God's going to open eyes over time like he did for me and whatever your story is, and then believe and then behave. So that's how Jesus lives that out. So again, we got to come to believe, come to understand that God is always at work, even when people aren't inviting him in. I think in this story, why is God intervening in this battle? It's kind of between two kings who honestly aren't that godly. But again, God always wants in. He's always working. And we can't just write it off. And we could have said the Syrians, they're such ungodly people. I mean, they're never going to find God. Forget that. You can read Jonah's story. And the Ninevites are such terrible people. I'm sure there's some modern day country that people think that about. They just live in such terrible ways, so, dishonoring to God. God wants nothing to do with them. But time and time and time again, he goes after the people that we tend to write off. Have you ever written off someone, just say, personally? Because you're like, no, Carter, you don't know what this person's like. They're like the farthest thing from God. I mean, I can't ever picture them ever becoming, a Christ follower. I don't know if you've ever had that. I've done that before, and God always has to remind me, hey, don't write people off. Right? Nobody's too far away. I did a memorial service this week. First time I've done one at Fort Rosecrans. Guy that went here. So sad, we'll miss him. Passed away from cancer. Always sat right in the second row taking notes, and just a great guy and a veteran. Just honored to do it for him. And he's a guy, and we still have this situation happen quite often, and I know it's painful when people are here at church and they're believers and their spouse isn't yet. And I know that's a tough spot to be. I've prayed with many of you going through that, and I know there's times you're just like, Carter, I just don't know if they're just ever going to come, and it's lonely, and I don't know if they're ever going to believe. And that was Steve. His wife came to church, never came. But had some awesome people always praying for him, always doing the belonging thing, right? We love on you, belong, include, and community. And you know what? Later in life, he did find Jesus and did believe, and actually just ate it up, just so passionate. I mean, he packed more discipleship into that short time, than I have yet in my journey. I mean, just so into it. And, Tommy and I saw him a few days before he passed. And even though he was in pain and sad, also decided to finally meet this Jesus I've been studying, right? Looking forward to it. And listen, it would have been easy to write him off. One of those kind of spouses who's just never going to find God. But we don't write people off because God's always working. Right? He will open their eyes. When we keep believing, keep praying, he does that. So then when we believe that God's always at work and always open people's eyes, then we get the opportunity then to actually try to live that out, to try to show people, well, let me show you a little bit of what God is like, to actually open people's eyes by showing them grace. I will argue that most of the time people's eyes are open to God, not through winning arguments with them in debates. Sometimes, sure, once in a while. Most of the people in your daily life are not well studied, and the reason they're not following God is because they've truly thought through every option and come to this intellectual, theological conclusion that they don't believe there's the science to back up that there's a God. You'll meet a couple people. My wife has a cousin like that. About 95% of other people I meet, they just haven't seen God's grace. Or they've been hurt by people who said they're in the name of God. So actually the powerful way their eyes are opened, is when we actually get to show them grace. But we know that's not easy. Right? I mean, in this world, we face this opposition. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. You don't just go out there and live gracefully and suddenly everything works out. Right? I mean, Syria is at war with Israel in this story, the people of God. We're going to face opposition. Well, check out what happens. So remember, the king of Aram, his plans keep getting given away by somebody. So verse 11, we're not surprised. It says, this enraged the king of Aram. He summoned his officers. He demanded them, tell me which one of us is on the side of Israel. He's saying, we have a mole. And which one of you is it? Right? Who's the hidden spy? And they say, none of us. My lord the king, it's Elisha's fault. Elisha, the prophet who's in Israel, he tells the king of Israel the very words you speak in your bedroom. Yikes. Whoa. That's a scary thought, right? It's not just he's giving away your military strategy. It's like, by the way, he seems to know like everything you say ever, even in the privacy of your bedroom, right? And so he says that. So the king, no surprise, says, well, go find out where he is so I can send men and capture him. So they find out where he is. He's in Dothan. He sends horses, chariots, and a strong force there. They go by night and surround the city. That's a lot for just a guy, just Elisha. They're not even saying he's like a great warrior. But this king is so enraged, like I'm sending the whole army to surround the house and capture this one guy. Of course, doesn't he think Elisha probably knows you're coming already, right? It's kind of like, how come fortune tellers haven't guessed the lottery numbers yet or whatever, right? It'd be a little like, I think Elisha knows that you're coming. But part of what's cool is notice these guys in Syria who have nothing to do with God, don't know anything about God, but they know who Elisha is. It's interesting. They know he's a prophet from Israel. They know he's connected to God. He represents God. It's like Elijah kind of had this like reputation. Went ahead of him in a good way. Someone who knows who God is. We can do that. Right? Part of what we do is we can find little ways to make our faith visible to people every day. We don't have to beat them over the head with Bibles. We just live in ways make our faith visible to people. I'm telling you, it works. It works. And that opens your eyes. God opened my eyes a couple weeks ago to something that honestly wouldn't even be a story. I wouldn't even think twice, much less think to share it with you, until it's like God's like, yeah, but here's how I'm at work. Right, so I once in a while, I'm a good enough husband, and I actually took my wife out on a date in OB, and we went to watch the sunset, which you can't do because it's always cloudy here. But we went anyway to the rooftop of OB Brewery and just kind of dinner, watch the sunset. So we were there and walked in, and I see a guy I know sitting at the bar who actually is the owner of a different restaurant and bar in OB. I'm like, cool, what are you doing here? And he knows me because we've worked together. Our church has had his restaurant here to help do different events we've done for the town, and we always talk about street fair together, so we're on a couple committees in the town together. So I know him through that. I'm like, what are you doing over here? He's like, oh, I'm just off work, hanging here before I go to my place. And then he says to the lady working the bar, he says, hey, have you met Carter yet? You need to meet him. He's a pastor here at New Break, and they do a bunch of cool stuff in our town. And so he introduces me to her, and she ends up being our waitress for me and my wife. And so while she's waiting on us, she's like, so which church is it? And she's like, so by the way, do you have anything for kids? Because I have a 10-year-old daughter who just really needs something and just wondering what you have. And I'm telling her, yeah, we have these kids create nights and different stuff that we do. And so just got to have this whole kind of awesome conversation. And I left just realizing, the guy who introduced me, by the way, he's never been here. He's just not really interested in coming as of now yet. He's not interested. He's never been here, but we have this friendship. I read, man, God used him to introduce me to somebody else. He's telling someone else they should meet me and learn more about this, even though he himself doesn't come, right? And it's just cool. And so God opens my eyes. Carter, look how I'm at work. Even when you're just hanging out on a Friday night somewhere, God's always at work, And part of that is, I'm not saying I've built some incredible reputation. I'm not perfect at it, still working on it. But, I do try to live out my faith, and we're living our faith out as a church, and that does build a reputation of trust that other people are saying, even though I don't go there, I want you to meet them. That's what happens when you make your faith visible every day. By the way, one of the things you can pray, maybe this is a new prayer for you every morning, you say, God, I pray for some divine appointments today. Lead me to divine appointments. It might be a conversation at 7-Eleven, or with my kid's teacher, or with the guy I surf with, or with someone in the toddler play group, or whatever it is. God, just bring some divine appointments, because we believe God's always at work. You know what that'll do, actually? Open your eyes to see even kind of everyday conversations and kind of running across people as being, maybe that's God doing something. By the way, so we're talking about it, just to really be ready for these divine appointments, here's the best kind of guidance I really know of in Scripture to really be able to speak to people in a way that helps open their eyes to God. My favorite passage about it, so you may have heard me speak about it before, but I'm going to do it again because it's so good. And I always talk about it in the life group that I lead as well. But he says this, the Apostle Peter, and he's a guy who said kind of dumb things a lot in the Gospels, but he ends up writing a letter, and he says, all right, here's how you're meant to open people's eyes to God. You ready? Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone that asks you to give a reason for the hope that you have. Always be prepared. Even when you're on the rooftop of OB Brewery and it's hanging on day, always be prepared because you never know what God's going to do. And here's the good news for anyone who might be intimidated by, Carter, I couldn't talk to people about God, faith. I don't know the Bible. I won't be able to win a theological argument with anybody. Well, good, because Peter doesn't say always be prepared to win a theological argument. He says always be prepared to talk about hope. Can you talk about hope? You can talk about hope, right? Do you have a little more hope in your life, at least, than you used to have, maybe before you believed in God? Maybe a lot more, somewhere in there. Whatever it is, you can talk about hope, right? That God's made a difference. Oh, but then Peter gives the but One of the biggest buts in the Bible, you ready? One of the biggest one. And the reason one of the biggest buts anywhere is because since Christ followers haven't taken this but seriously right here, it actually has hurt the reputation of Christ followers and churches everywhere for years, decades, maybe centuries, because we missed this but. Do it with gentleness and respect. Oh. How much gentleness and respect are you feeling in this country these days? You're seeing it a whole lot on social media. It's everywhere, right? Everyone's so respectful. They're also just so gentle. See it all over, right? News, leaders, social media, everyday people, political people. It's hard to find. How loud will it speak? If the Jesus followers are the ones probably known for the opposite, maybe, but if we were the ones that are actually respectful, gentle. He says, you want to open people's eyes to God? You talk about hope. And you do it respectfully. That sounds like the opposite of shouting it at people through a bullhorn, right? He says, by the way, keep a clear conscience. People see your behavior. He's basically saying, make your walk match up to your talk. He says, you know what? They might still try to slander you. They'll still be malicious. Because remember, this is hard, right? People warred against Israel. People still might war against you when you speak up for your faith. Yep, you won't be surprised by it or shocked, right? You're not going to be horrified by it. You knew it's coming. He says, but, have your walk match your talk. Now, none of us are going to be perfect at that, but talk is cheap, so hopefully some of my actions are backing that up. And that's how he says we open people's eyes. Just be ready. Know how to talk about hope and do it with gentleness, with respect. And we do that. That opens up the eyes of people so God can really work in them. So what keeps us blinded from seeing God then? What keeps other people and what keeps you? How come we don't always see God at work in our life? One of the biggest things, honestly, is fear. Think about Elisha's servant. I'm guessing been his servant a while, followed Elisha around, seen him do many miracles. And as soon as this king sends his whole army after Elisha, his first response is fear. Check it out. We haven't read this yet. Verse 15, he says, when the servant of the man of God got up, he went out early the next morning. An army with horses and chariots has surrounded the city. He says, oh no, my Lord, what are we going to do? Imagine he gets up, goes out to kind of get the morning paper, and then looks up, and it's like army everywhere, right? And it's like, what are we going to do? How often in our life, even if you've been a Christ follower a long time, you've seen God do all this stuff, but all of a sudden it's like, nope, I just hit the one challenge in my life that God's not going to be able to overcome, right? All of a sudden there's fear. Yeah, but what if? What if God doesn't do anything in this one? What if he doesn't show up? He feels totally overwhelmed. We're outnumbered, right? And he's just blinded by fear. That blinds us. Either a distrust of God or maybe a pride. We think I got this on my own. Or just this fear. What if the thing you're going through is the one thing that God can't seem to overcome? I love Elisha's answer. Elisha's answer to this. It is actually my favorite verse in the story. And check out what he says in verse 16. He actually just asked God. And you can do that. You can ask God. Check it out. He says, don't be afraid. He says, you know why? Because those who are with us are more than those who are with them. That's some cool words right there. Those who are with us, those who are with God, are always more than, always greater than, always more power than anything else you're going to face. That sounds like the words of Jesus. In John 16:33, Jesus says, you're going to have a lot of troubles in this world, so take heart. And that's not a great verse. I've never seen that one on a refrigerator magnet right there. Just, you're going to have many troubles in this world. Jesus, right? It's not very inspiring. He says, but, there's the other but take heart because I have overcome the world every time. Or as his apostle John ends up writing later, he says, greater is the one who is in you than the one who is in the world. That sounds just like this, right? Greater is he who is in you than he who is in the world. Greater is the God in you than anything you're going to face. God's always more than. I wonder if this verse is the whole reason God brought some of you here today. Think you're here by accident or just stumbled in or whatever. But what if God's like, hey, I just needed you to remember this area in your life that you feel totally overwhelmed by right now, and you feel like I'm not answering your prayers, and you feel like I'm not going to do anything, you feel intimidated, and God says, I just wanted you to know, never forget, when you're with me, it's always more than. It's always more than. You just can't see it yet. So what do we do about that? I can't see it yet, though, God. I mean, Elisha knows it. The problem is the servant can't see it. So guess what the next verse is? Elisha prays, open his eyes, Lord. Open his eyes that he can see. And you know what? God does it, and he can see. Opens his eyes, and all of a sudden he sees all the armies of God around him. These kind of like chariots of fire. That'd be a good movie. Chariots of fire and all these horses, right? Surrounded all around. And now he realizes how big God's army is. Certainly a little bit of reference to kind of spiritual battle always going on in our life. Don't have time to dig into all that today. But we can pray that prayer that Elisha prayed. Open my eyes, God. Open his eyes. Open their eyes to you. That is actually one of the things I pray the most when I'm just walking around OB or out on the pier or whatever, just kind of praying for the town. Say, God, just open their eyes. And I know sometimes people pray, open their eyes to their sin and all the ways that they're off, and I get that, but I pray more, God, open their eyes. I just desperately want people, especially in this town, to connect that the things that they love and value, that actually God values those things too. Because I think we haven't done a good job of showing that God actually, remember, is at work, like connects into the real life things that people are actually about. You know, think about in this town, it's a huge deal, 365 nights of the year. Not a single night goes by, you won't look at social media and see someone posted a picture of the sunset. Because it's just sunset, right? Just all the time. There's bars that do a sunset toast. The cliffs are flocked with it. The pier's always full because everyone wants to see sunset because they love it and they value it. Beautiful creation. And I just want their eyes open to know you can know the Creator. You can know who made that, you know? And he actually made it for you. So connect that. We're in a town that loves art. You see it everywhere. Loves music. You see it everywhere. I want them to know, even though not all art and music is used for God, art and music ultimately comes from God, and he cares deeply about it. That's why here we have a mural and we've hosted art shows and we do open mic nights because we want people to know, yeah, God cares about art and music too. Our town cares so much because they're actually so good. OB is so good at being so neighborly, so generous. You can kind of follow these stories on social media. It's crazy. Somebody will say, hey, I need someone to help me move a couch like this afternoon in the middle of the day. Some stranger they don't even know says, I'll be there with my truck and do it. And it's so cool, right? Like it's just a town that's so into being neighborly. And I want to say, yeah, and there's a God who is the first one to say, love your neighbor as yourself. And he meant your literal neighbor. Our God is into neighborliness. In fact, he wrote the book on it. And he's all about love your neighbor. He's into compassion, into generosity, into caring for each other and reaching out and even the stranger. I just want their eyes open, right? So who in our life, we pray, God, just, open my eyes. I want to see more of you. And again, but open up their eyes to see. I love that Elisha, he wasn't just content to trust God. He wasn't just like, well, you should trust God like I do. He actually prayed, God, I just want you to open their eyes. I hope you'll start praying that for people in your life, especially the ones that you never pray for and have given up on. That's what I'm challenging myself to do. Because when we pray that God would show up and open their eyes, then he takes his work, because he's always at work. He takes our work, our actions, and we're obedient and want to go show grace, and he uses them together to change people. And he works through that. And again, it's not easy. We face different kind of trials in it, different kind of hostility. So did Elisha. Even though God's army showed up, he's still got to deal with this whole thing. And he had to sort of be kind of on the run for his life. Most prophets seem to have to. Here's what he does next, by the way, sort of an unexpected part of the story. As the enemy came rushing toward him, so the their army's still coming after him, Elisha prayed to the Lord, strike this army with blindness. So God struck them with blindness as Elisha asked. So I guess that means our take home is any enemies in your life, start praying that God will blind them and then not they can't see anymore. No, don't do that. That's not like God blind my ex and my boss so that they can't see what they're doing. I don't think that's what we're supposed to apply. Elisha, he is kind of fighting hostility a little bit back with hostility. He actually goes on to deceive them. Actually says, you're in the wrong place, everyone. Follow me. I'll bring you to the right place. And he leads them ultimately into Samaria in Israel. So he actually leads them to his own country, and now they're stuck. And now they're going to be surrounded. They're going to be captured. I don't think we're meant to learn to blind people and deceive them. But Elisha, one thing we do see in here, though, is he is always turning to God right away, though, in prayer. I just wonder, how often is our first response prayer? Or how often is our first response when we get hurt is to just want to strike back, sort of fight fire with fire. A little bit what Elisha's doing. That's not the end of the story, though. That's why we can't just pull a verse out of context and go, oh, see, I'm supposed to pray that God will strike people with blindness. We got to understand the whole story. Check out what happens next. So Elisha literally just delivered the entire army to the king of Israel. They're in front of him in his country. He can do whatever he wants with them. And guess what he's excited to do? Because he asked it twice. The king of Israel saw him and he says, shall I kill them, Elisha? Shall I kill them now? And you can tell the king's pretty excited, right? What are we going to do? How are we going to take these guys out? Because we can do anything we want. How are we going to put them all to death? And Elisha answers and says, no, you shouldn't kill them. That's not what we're going to do today, king. By the way, you didn't capture them, right? That was God doing that. So no, we're not going to kill them. Elisha actually does respond with grace. Grace, by the way, is always greater than revenge. Always greater than revenge. I know it feels good, revenge. Sometimes we're like, but Carter, you don't know, I'm going to say hurt me. I just want them to experience just a little bit of the pain that I was hurt with. Just want them to just have to taste a little bit of their own medicine. But you know what? God's word, Old Testament, New Testament, always been about that. Here's one of the clearest places anywhere. There's no grade I have to debate here. No Bible degree needed. God just simply says, don't repay evil for evil. That's pretty clear. That's pretty black and white. Don't repay anyone evil for evil. He says, do what's right. Do what's right in the eyes of people. You know why? Because that's going to open their eyes to God. Then I love, he says, if at all possible, live at peace with people. As far as it depends on you, not everyone else will choose to live at peace with you. You are freed from that. You don't have to carry that. It's not your fault. It takes two people to live at peace together. But he says, you better do your part. Jesus said it as, blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are the peacemakers. Which one do you think opens people's eyes better to God? A group of Christ followers that's picking fights, picketing, starting arguments, or one that's being peacemakers. Right? He says when you live at peace, that will speak louder than revenge. That will open people's eyes to God. That's what Elisha does. It's not the only thing that he does. We'll see in a second. But I'm telling you, it's powerful when you're a peacemaker. That's what we've tried to be in this community as a church. I've told you stories. We're trying to kind of bring people together, kind of homeless, business owners, residents, kind of rich, poor, young, old, whatever it is. Just be peacemakers, bring together. And that works. God really uses that. One of my favorite comments I've ever heard someone's ever used to describe our place. I found it the other day again, and because I save emails when I get them, encouraging ones, because I need them on the discouraging days. And someone who doesn't go here said this. He said, I feel like you are a third place between the church and the world, offering a listening ear and bridging the gap of understanding. That's powerful. And you can be a peacemaker, right? That'll speak powerfully to people. And that's what Elisha was doing. And not only that, you got to here's the very end of the story, all right? And honestly, in all the stories I've ever heard of any battle, fiction and nonfiction, of all the ones I've ever heard, I've never seen a battle end like this. And this is a true story. Crazy ending to it. Elisha says, no, don't kill him. Here's what we're going to do instead. Picture the look on the king's face. Here's what we're going to do instead. Set food and water before them so they can eat and drink before they go back to their king. So he prepared a great feast for them. And after they finished eating and drinking, he sent them away. They returned to their king. And the bands from Aram stopped raiding Israel's territory. Wow, look at that. Grace actually stopped the cycle of revenge and payback. And how crazy. Elisha says, let's just throw a giant feast for him. I can't imagine the two armies just eating together. That's got to be some awkward, dinner table conversation, right? They're eating a meal together. Hey, weren't you the one that was just pointing a spear at me? Yeah, can you pass the salt? And so, they're just having a giant feast together, a party. And then when they're done, I don't know if they just got done eating and all right, well, I guess we don't need to battle anymore. We're going back home to our king. And then they literally just return home and they stop attacking Israel. It works. By the way, food works. Oh, it's a great equalizer, right? Now you're like, why are you guys always going on about eating tacos with people? Because that's what we're trying to do, right? Bring some grace, bring some peace. And so we actually invited the whole community later, and I put it in some of the OB groups and said, yeah, you don't even have to come to church. We just want to eat with you. right? Because, look at the power of these stories and what God does. And so he says, when you show grace, when you lead with that, kindness, compassion, it actually paves the way for God to show up and do huge things. And so that's what we're always trying to do. That's how we're going to open the eyes of God to people. So let's bring it home, bring it practical. Who's that for you? Who needs to see some of that from you? They don't need more advice, and they don't need more arguments, and they don't need more of this or that. They need some kindness and compassion. Doesn't mean you don't have, boundaries where needed, but kindness and compassion, which, by the way, those words, I think we sometimes kind of misunderstand. When the word compassion is used throughout the Bible, I think of compassion as like, love, like loving people with all your heart. Technically, in the original language, it's more the idea of loving people, not just all your heart, but love them with all your guts. And you can even translate it as love them with all your bowels. And I'm just going to go ahead and recommend any of the single guys here, even married one too, don't say to a lady, I love you with all my bowels, because it's just not going to come off like you think it will. It is biblically accurate and a powerful statement, but it's not very romantic. So, right? But it's that idea, just loving people with kind of, like from our guts. And then kindness, I always think of it, oh yeah, I know, be nice, right? Be kind. Let's all practice kindness, do some good deeds. Kindness, biblical kindness, way tougher. You ready? This doesn't sound as fun, way harder. Biblical kindness. It's be kinder to someone than you think they deserve. And be kinder than anyone would expect you to. That's hard, right? Because we all have our level of what we think people deserve. And God doesn't address that. He just says, whatever that is for you, be kinder than that. Do what people don't expect. You think that's going to open people's eyes to God, right? You think that'll show them a glimpse of who he is when we're able to be kinder than what someone expects, show really this deep compassion, try to just show them who God is, especially when they're struggling. If you don't know where to start with, man, just think of someone in your life that's struggling right now, because I'm guessing you know quite a few. And it's about just finding the practical ways. Remember, we said just demonstrate grace to them. Show them who God is. We do that by listening. Here's what I'm working on. Listening without trying to problem solve, without advice giving. Just really listen to someone. And when they're done, you can say, I'm sorry. That sounds hard. Let me know if you need anything. I'm here for you. Give them a hug, Pray. By the way, not just pray for them, because people hear that sometimes. I'll pray for you. That's powerful. You got to make sure you actually do it. But praying with them. I challenge you to pray with people. Even if you're like, no, I don't ever pray out loud, Carter. I never know what to say, and it's going to sound terrible. I promise you, if you will just pray with someone, not only will God give you the right words to say, no matter how bad you think your prayer sounded, they will not go away going, wow, that was a lame prayer. That guy does not know what they're doing. I promise they will walk away feeling humbled and honored that you did. Actually, watching you fumble through it is going to be more powerful than hearing some eloquent prayer from a pastor, right? Because it's just going to feel so real. And it's just being Jesus' hands and feet. They ate together. What if the person that's struggling, next door neighbor, the person at work, totally unexpected, like this feast was in the battle, is, you just bring them a coffee, bring them a gift card, bring them cookies, bring them a meal, right? Just that kind of stuff, just really kind of revealing that. Because when we act that way, when we be that towards people, it just opens their eyes. It opens their eyes to God. I wanted to close with one last story, because I just wanted your help, just kind of praying for this guy, because it's just another person in my life. I'm thinking, I just want God to open their eyes, but it's a guy in his 60s, lives in OB, and he's real active in the community, and he's on one of the committees here that's trying to do some great things in the town, and they needed just a quiet, free place to meet. And so we open up our building, because we're just, it's God's building, so we try to share it all week long. And so we invited them in, and, I come in and unlock it on Monday nights periodically for them. They do a meeting, and he's like, just thank you. I know you're not involved in any of this, but you're just so generous. You let us use it, and we're trying to do good for the community. I'm like, I know. Let us know. If anything you ever come up with needs some help, we want to help you in that. But he's a guy, by the way, who's like, yeah, I don't go to church. I'm just never going to be interested in that. And so he's not at all. But he asked recently, he goes, so I do need to ask you something about your church. Are you one of those really political churches that's always like talking about all the politics and telling everybody who they should vote for? And I said, no. He's like, well, I heard you were. I'm like, no, I don't know. We really have never done that. We just try to help people get to know Jesus, and we figure he can take it from there. And he's like, all right, well, because I got and I'm trying to remember if it's his niece or daughter, but he says, well, I got my niece, and she's looking for a church, so I thought about maybe of recommending yours, right? And so here's someone who's going to invite somebody to church, and they don't even go here yet. And so I'm just praying, God, just open her eyes and open his eyes, right? What if she's the key to opening his eyes? Because we can't write him off. It's not too late in life. And so that just reminds me of what I've just tried to shape everything that we do here as a church around. We'll just close with these words from Apostle Paul, but I love that he says this, and this is what we're striving to do, and this is what you can do in your own life, is make it as clear as you can, says Paul, clear as you can to everyone you meet, that you're on their side, that you're working with them and not against them. That will help them see. That will open their eyes, right, to see a God who's at work, who's coming. Let them know you're with them, not against them. Doesn't mean I agree with what everybody does. I don't have to agree with all their behaviors, even all their views on everything. I can still find ways to work with them, not against them. That's what this guy has sensed. There's something about our church that is working with him. And I think he doesn't understand, why are you guys working with me? I don't go there and you don't even know me, but somehow you're working with me, not against me. And so it's starting to draw him in. And so I'd love to just pray for him together and even some of the people in your life. So let's do that. God, we pray. We just want to pray right now. There's power in prayer of a whole group of people. And just pray for my friend's eyes. He's funny. He's been in this building a lot.